Okay, update on precious metals. We'll start with silver, then go through gold, GDX, and we'll take a quick look at platinum as well. And so you have silver here, the weekly chart. And so we still have this weekly swing high from week 7, which is very bearish because the weekly cycle is generally 26 to 27 weeks long. So if you have a high on week 7, that means you'd be declining for 7 weeks. And we're now on week 17, so we're still pretty mature in the cycle. All we have to do is break this high here at $25.40, and we'll see if we can do that. At this point, we haven't broken down yet, right? We had a nice little rally last week. We have an inside week as we expected because of this upper wick, and we just haven't broken down just yet. So, not necessarily terribly negative. On the daily chart, though, we can see we have a high on day 26, and we have a swing high below this high here, right? And so that's not great. So we'll have to see. I think the first thing we'll want to see is if we could recapture this level here at 24.17 and change. But it's very likely we're moving into a daily cycle low, and so we'll have to see if we can hold. I think I would say like this area here, so maybe like around 23.40, 23 and a half. I mean, we'll have to see, but now is really where the rubber hits the road, and it doesn't, the odds don't look good. If we look at gold, so this is actually a little bit more. Uh, the weekly cycle is a little bit more ambiguous. It's interesting. It's possible we had an ICL on week 18 here, right, and that would put us in week 6 here, or this is week 24 of this same cycle. I suspect it's week 24 here. We'll have to see again. Similar to silver, if we could break above 1877, that would mean that we are in a new weekly cycle. And more importantly, we've made a new high on a weekly time frame. Because notice, each of these highs since August of 2020 have been lower, and so that would break that pattern. That would be your big signal. As of right now, the fact that gold is leading silver in terms of performance is definitely not a good sign. But we'll have to watch the price action. The Fed meeting will certainly be important, like for many assets. And we'll look at platinum really quickly. So that is in week 17, I believe. So also just getting a bit later in its weekly cycle, week 18 actually. And you can see previous weekly cycles have had highs around week 15, 16, maybe in the 20s. And so we're getting late. It's becoming more and more likely that this week 8 high was your ICH, your high for the weekly cycle, which is pretty negative because these cycles tend to last around 30 weeks. And so that would be a decent amount of time to decline. And the last thing we'll look at is GDX, the miners, which really are looking very similar to silver in a lot of ways. They're actually on pretty much the same cycle versus the cycle for gold. And so you can see the miners here. Are we on week 17? We did get a slight lower low on this week here, but we're trying to rally back, it looks like. But, having seen this candle, it looked pretty bearish. The fact that we've recovered from that low is, interesting, but ultimately, this swing high on week 7, similar to the swing high in silver, is what we have to eclipse. That's about $35. Otherwise, we could be declining for still another, even 7 or 8 weeks before we get a weekly cycle low. And if we look at the daily, I think this is a perfect example of just, reading a chart, just very simple. So we made a high on day 24, and then the next day we just, well, first off, that day we made a new high, and then went red, but we ran out of time in that day. The next day, we kind of finished the job, right? The selling continued, and more importantly, we made a swing high, right? Once we went below this low, we've made a swing high, and so that increases the odds that your high was on day 24, and we're now declining into a daily cycle low. The magnitude of the rejection is just not positive. This sort of snapback is interesting, But as with everything else, we're gonna have to see follow through this week. Like, ideally, we would recapture, this 33 level this week. Seems unlikely again with the broader markets melting down. But again, that Fed meeting is going to be telling sort of one way or another. So we're either going to see a sharp breakdown, or maybe we do see a rally above 33, which would obviously be incredibly bullish. So that's how the metals stand. Really, I'd say a fairly, I'd say at best a mixed picture. Gold looking more positive than silver, which again is generally not a good sign anyway. I'd say caution is warranted, and just read those price action signals. There are a lot of swing highs out there that we need to recapture.